Like it, huh?
Hi, I'm Linda Paul, and this is my friend Rebecca King. I've been doing some articles on deconstructing trauma. The idea is that we have so much trauma in our lives today that we have to kind of deconstruct it to find out the pieces. And I've gone over two things in the past writings, and now we're going to center on what it means to have retribution. So, Rebecca, tell me what you think of when you think of retribution.
Well, retribution doesn't seem like forgiveness at all. It definitely feels like you wanting to get even. You're going to get back at that person. You're going to make them feel the hurt that you felt.
And that's pretty true about anybody that practices retribution, but it goes further than that. Many times, people who practice retribution is more than just getting back at a person, they go for the juggler. They have to annihilate someone. And what is interesting to me is that retribution never gives any room to the person who is being attacked, never helps them understand what happened. As a consequence, of retribution, people don't understand that when someone is angry with them and starts attacking them and saying things and doing things and talking behind their back and doing all of this retribution behavior, the person who's being attacked has no idea, usually no concept of what's going on. So there's that part there where we have to kind of untangle what is going on when a person starts attacking someone. Why do they do that? To have retribution. And I think that some of that goes back to being a person who can't stand to have someone have the last word.
Yeah.
And I know that with children, if you've had children, that is so true. Children have to have the last word, and they will go after it as much as they can to get to the last word. But usually the parents always end up saying, because I said so.
Stop it there.
And I think what is so interesting is that no matter what we do as we grow up, if we don't learn how to achieve forgiveness, we get locked into this retribution phase far more than we should. And I think that people need to understand. So the first part of retribution might be, why is someone attacking me? And why are they being so harsh? And why do they have to annihilate me?
Yeah.
And how you know that that's happening is you feel it in your solar plexus. If you feel like that you're being choked or punched or hit, that is usually a good sign that somebody is after you. So when you feel that way, what is the first response? What do you think? What is your first response?
Well, it's like a fight or flight kind of move, and
Mm-hmm.
I will flight my way on out of that situation, but more just like in a recluse kind of way. That's not healthy either. It's,
No.
yeah.
And I think that many times people do that and they walk away from that kind of bullying behavior, and that person who's the bully never is confronted.
Yeah.
And the worst part of it is that the person who's just been traumatized by the behavior, they never get relief, and they never really learn how to stop the behavior. So, a good part of that retribution that people require from people they don't like means that the person they're doing it to has to turn around and say, stop.
Yeah.
And we don't have that as a society. I don't know why. I know that there are several religions that talk about how you have to stop that kind of aberrant behavior. Uh, and the type of person that is a bully, they're never going to try to change their behavior unless somebody gets in their face.
Yeah.
And so how do you do that without being aggressive? Okay. And that is a tough thing to talk about. I find that when people are in that mode, that sometimes you do have to get aggressive to get their attention, especially if they are talking over you all the time. So when you're in a place where someone is not listening and they're trying to defeat you by talking over you over and over and over again, you get to call stop.
Yeah.
You get to say, well, wait a minute. I don't think you're listening to me. And that is a good place to start with someone because they've never heard that before. A lot of times, the people who have had that kind of mean spirit or who are going for the juggler or whatever, they've never been told, stop that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes in their understanding, they're being successful with that. Well, they're not being successful, as we all know. They're being very, I'm trying to think of a good word. They're using behavior that has got them to a certain place every time. And unfortunately,
not there.
They never learned.
No.
They never learned. I think some of it can be things that we need to teach in school. And I know that there are a lot of people who are teaching things like bullying behavior and how to respond, and especially in grade schools.
Yeah.
Because as we all know, bullies have always had the run of the yard.
Yeah.
But we also need to start making people accountable for what they say and how they say it. So that's the first step.
True.
In retribution. Whenever it's coming at you, you have to say, stop it. I don't think you're listening to me.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't get them off page or off kilter, your best bet is to leave the conversation because they're not going to change what they're doing. And then I think the next step is to ask questions. You know, if someone's after you and coming at your face, and just say, what do you think? I guarantee you, nobody has ever asked them what they think or how they feel. There is never a place in their mind that anybody cares about them, you know?
Yeah.
And you see that happening a lot in today's society. But if you can say, well, what do you feel? How do you feel about this? If they're dealing with their feelings, they have to answer you in a different way.
Yeah.
So that would be the next step. Yeah, how do you feel? What do you think about it? Because turning the question back to them is always a way to try to change the rhetoric, but also the direction.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to do that. I think that a lot of people, when they get very angry, they're after one thing. And if you can ask them, what do you think or how do you feel? And they have to stop and recalibrate.
Yeah.
It helps them.
Almost feel like they already feel like they're not heard. And that's why they're at that point, right? Of where they are talking over you. They are listening to anyone else because they feel like they haven't been heard. And you even mentioned that, you know, it comes from a stem of trauma, probably themselves, that the reason why they are on you.
Well, and we know that trauma is intergenerational because we also know that the whole prison system is intergenerational.
Yeah.
And that people who have been raised in families where there is a particular kind of trauma or a great deal of trauma, they just shut down. They don't even process anymore. I know that when I'm talking to my women who have had sexual abuse, they talk about the fact that they just shut down. They don't even think about it anymore. They don't want to know, and that's how they handle it. Many times that kind of trauma, when it comes into the person's grown-up life, they're still acting from that same trauma they had as a child, but they've learned to grow it up a little bit, matured a little bit. But again, I think you're right.
Yeah.
They don't think anybody is listening to them either.
Yeah.
So there's some of that behavior where I'm saying, you're not hearing me.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, you're not hearing me.
Yeah.
And the two people, somebody needs to stop that kind of confrontation and say, what do you think?
Open up a productive dialogue instead of one where they're attacking each other. Yeah.
And also, I've taught for years that HALTs: hungry, angry, lonely, tired, and sick. If you are hungry, angry, lonely, tired, or sick, and someone is traumatizing you, you have to get out of the situation. There's no way that you can make any kind of fresh perspective if you're so hungry.
Hangry.
Hangry, yeah. That hanger thing. People who, especially people who have food insecurity, hungry is huge to them. Angry. When you're angry, you will say things you otherwise would never say. Lonely. There is a difference between feeling alone and being lonely. As a general rule, if you are alone, it's a choice. I choose to be by myself. So I'm reading a book, or I'm, watching something on television, or whatever, walking down the street. That is a choice. Yeah. But loneliness is not a choice, and it usually comes with depression. So hunger, anger, lonely, and then tired. Have you ever made a good decision when you're tired?
No.
I always find myself just, trying to keep my eyes open in the middle of a conversation. And I finally have to say, can we pick this up tomorrow? Can we put a pin in this? Because when you're tired, you can't even formulate the thought.
No.
Okay? Yeah. And the last one is sick. When you're sick, you simply cannot have bandwidth to take on a bully. You can't be traumatized. When you're that sick, when your body is sick, when you're running a fever, when you're having all kinds of problems, that's not the time to try to make decisions. That's not the time to have a constructive conversation.
No.
So, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, and sick. If you're in any one of those, as someone is trying to be aggressive, you have the right to say, we need to talk about this at a later time. Yeah. You don't have to tell them which one you are. You just have to say, let us meet tomorrow at, and then give them two choices, 10 or 2 tomorrow, and we can talk about it then. Usually when they're angry, if they cool off enough between now and 10 in the morning, they're not so willing to be aggressive. But they can also work themselves up into a lather too. So you kind of have to read the room. But most of the time, people, they're angry. They're having a moment where they're not getting what they want or what they need. And you just walked in the room and they're going to punish you. Okay. So many times that retribution you're feeling, you weren't any part of the discussion in the first place. So let's take that layer, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, sick, get that in front of you and say, stop. Yeah. And then give them two choices tomorrow or Thursday or next week or whatever to come back and talk. Many times, if we can just repeat what people are saying. Now, I know we do that with children, but
in management.
And management too. I think what you're saying is, but we have to reframe.
Yeah.
Have to reframe because sometimes what people are saying, they're not really speaking from a point of order or a point of contention. They're still over here dealing with hungry, angry, lonely, tired, sick, and they're just shotgunning it. Yeah. Okay. And it's really hard to get with them on that. But if you can start to reframe what they're saying and say, well, I think what I'm hearing you say is that correct? Sometimes, most of the time, that will work. Okay. There are those times it won't. Don't do it to someone who has a gun in their hand, for instance. But, reframing what you're hearing is a good way to make sure that you are hearing what they're saying.
And understanding. Yeah.
Well, understanding may be the next level. I'm hearing what you're saying. And then can you tell me how I need to feel or process this?
Yes.
For instance, in business, it's pretty simple in that most of the things that you're working with in business have to do with things, with a meeting, with a report, whatever.
Yeah.
So when someone comes in and they're very upset, you're just trying to find out what they're upset about.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you try to reframe what they're saying. But I also know that in dealing with psychology, you have to get people to also reframe their question.
Yeah.
Because until they can say, oh, well, that's not what I meant, you're not getting clarity. And that's the bottom line. Finding clarity and learning how to deal with people is so difficult. Yeah. If they're angry and if you're, I got to be out of here in 10 minutes. That's the time to put a pin in it and say, let's deal with this. But always there has to be a reframing of the original disappointment or the original argument. Okay. I know that part of what is happening in the American school system is we used to learn how to debate. And debate is a little different set of rules, because you're not hating on someone when you're debating. You've picked a side.
Yeah.
And whether you believe it or not, that's your side that you're having to debate. And when people actually have to learn how to debate, then they can see that, well, there's always more than one side to the equation.
Yeah.
And the last thing I want to say is that there's a spectrum. We talk about autism as if it's a spectrum. And we sometimes forget because we're so programmed for binary. It's a black or white issue. It's a yes or no answer. And yet the spectrum may have yes, maybe, no, huh?
Yeah.
There's different points on that line where the original general statement no longer holds true. And if we can't go along that line and say, well, wait a minute, if we're here and they're here, that's a lot of room between us. But if we can say, okay, we're kind of both in around the middle of this spectrum, that's a lot shorter area to work with. Many times people want to force you to the one side so they can be the other side.
Yeah.
Binary reductionism is a big term, but what it means is you're being forced to reduce all your thinking to just one side. Okay? And we kind of have a problem with that in America today because of certain movements. And we've got to start learning to say, no, wait a minute. They're here and I'm here. How much space is there? And really recognizing on the spectrum where we are and where they are. Because if we're going to collaborate, if we're going to have a discussion of any merit, we have to know who is where on the spectrum. I guarantee you, very few times are we clear to the right or clear to the left.
Yes.
We're kind of somewhere in between.
True.
And if we really were honest with ourselves, we can see some of the points that someone else is making.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we don't like them, but we can see them. Okay. We've lost that ability. I think COVID really did us a disservice because we started not meeting socially. We took a break.
Yeah.
And because of that, we siloed into our families, and our families pretty much informed us. And that, and maybe a couple of TV shows. And gaming. I have to go back and say gaming is a huge thing. Well, because it's entertainment, but we don't realize how much trauma is in some gaming. Okay. Anytime you have something where people are carrying huge guns, that's trauma. But we have to start looking at how we can get closer. So if they're here and we're here, and it's not here and it's not here, then the middle is between where we are. And we've got to start trying to walk toward the middle. My grandchildren constantly remind me they know how to collaborate, and the U.S. Congress does not.
Oh, wow.
And I think in their thinking, that's probably true. But they've been taught to collaborate with each other, and the total grade is based on their collaboration. Yeah, so they're different, and they see in us that binary reductionism and how that's affecting them. So their trauma is, well, why are you doing that?
Wow.
Why do you try to force us into a position where we're not there yet?
Yeah.
So I think that
very interesting.
Deconstructing trauma and getting to the point of what is retribution and why do people want it? And the biggest point I can see is they can force you to the ends of the spectrum and start picking off all the things that they want to pick off. And yet, maybe we're here, not here.
Mm-hmm.
So retribution is more about that space between where I am and where you are and the complete black or complete white.
Mm-hmm.
And we need that conversation. I really think that that's a huge part of what we don't understand, and we have not learned how to do that. So my next post is going to be on deconstructing trauma and how we move past retribution. Please join me whenever I do that particular post and see what you think. Thanks for being with us today.